There is no question to me that the great civil rights debate of the 20th century was racial equality for all. And while we haven't gotten all the way there, in my opinion, and we still have work to go and a road to hoe when it comes to equality and race relations in this country, I think there is no doubt that in 2014, this country is in a much better way than it was, let's say, in 1914 when Jim Crow laws were the law of the land in the South, or even in 1964 when the Civil Rights Act was actually passed, and the Voting Rights Act a little bit later on and so forth. We've come a long way. There's still work to do. But I do think that now in the 21st century, there is something else that has far surpassed racial equality and race relations as the great civil rights debate of the 21st century, and that is gay marriage. And now I realize in stupid America that this issue elicits a lot of strong passions and emotions on all sides of the spectrum on this issue. I get that and I understand it. In terms of the people that oppose gay marriage, I understand why you wouldn't like it. I understand why you wouldn't agree with it. Doesn't mean that I agree with you or think that you are necessarily right, but I understand it. You were a lot of times raised in a very religious or church like background where you were raised to believe in the word of the Lord and to follow the teachings of the Bible, where homosexuality is a sin and that it's marriage is defined as between one man and one woman. It was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. That you classify homosexuality as immoral. You classify it as being sin, as being against God's will, and the type of behavior that will earn you a one-way trip ticket, to hell for eternity. I get that, and I understand that. And I'm not here to sit there and tell you that you were wrong in the way that you view things or the way that you think about things. However, I still think that this is a civil rights issue. And I do think, again, that this is the great civil rights issue for the 21st century. I understand a lot of people in stupid America don't like them queers. Keep them away from me. I love my gods, I love my guns, and I love my woman. The penis goes in the vagina, it doesn't go on the pee-pee or in the poo-poo. Sorry, having a little bit of fun here. However, this is a very serious issue because I think somewhere along the way we've gotten off the track and we've lost sight of the reality and we've lost grips on what the truth and reality of the situation actually is. And here's what I mean, is that there seems to be this great perception, and this is something else I'll talk about with Stupid America later this month, that the United States was formed as a Christian nation per se. Well, people disagree on whether or not this is fully true or not, but we do know in terms of the Constitution that the First Amendment established freedom of religion, freedom from religion, and prevented the establishment of a state religion, as you will. That was part of the whole purpose of people coming here to colonize in the first place, getting away from England, was to have that separation of church and state, the freedom to be able to practice and believe whatever they wanted. But there's also this misconception, I think, in America particularly, that marriage is strictly a religious ceremony. Well, let's look at it this way. If marriage is strictly a religious ceremony, then banning something because it is not with your teachings, or banning something because it is immoral according to the Bible, or saying it's not a Christian thing to do, banning it on those principles would in fact, in my opinion, be a form of the state and the church merging and going away from the separation of church and state, which again would be unconstitutional, would it not? To sit there and say that would basically be saying that Christianity is the state religion, that Christianity is the religion and the law of the land. Again, that is something that the First Amendment strictly prohibits and is strictly against. And I don't think this is disputed. This is about separation of church and state. And when you think about it from that standpoint, to sit there and say, well, because we're Christian and we don't like it, this should be illegal because marriage is a religious ceremony. It's a ceremony where you're taking a vow in front of God and your family and everything else. Again, like I said, You're preventing somebody from practicing their freedom of or freedom from religion if you do that. So I think on sheer religious grounds, banning gay marriage is unconstitutional. I truly do. Because by endorsing that and endorsing what this church believes in, to me, I think blurs the lines too much of the separation between church and state and basically creates a state religion of Christianity, which is not what's supposed to be done. Now, I also look at this from other standpoints and say that gay marriage banning is discrimination and unconstitutional as well, because when you go to get married, you have to file a license, right, at your county clerk's office or what have you. So you do that for things like tax purposes and estate purposes and legal purposes and all of that. Marriage itself is not a religious ceremony. I realize a lot of people do it in churches or do it with a religious context or make it a religious ceremony. But marriage itself, as it is constructed and defined here in the 21st century in America, and it has been this way for a long period of time, is not a religious ceremony. This is a civil ceremony. You have to apply for a license to get married. You have to pay a fee to get that license to be able to get married. You cannot legally have your marriage recognized unless you're talking about common law stuff, what have you. You cannot do it without having that marriage license first. And even I think a lot of times when you go to a church to get married, they will ask you for the marriage license. And people that have gone through the process that I have not yet, but I will soon enough, will be able to tell me one way or another whether I'm right here on this. But to sit there and say that you can't do this because you're Adam and Steve or Gwen and Gail, I think is ridiculous. You might not like your queers, but that doesn't mean that they aren't entitled as human beings and American citizens in particular to the same basic fundamental rights you are. To sit there and deny somebody the right to marry who they want from a civil standpoint because you don't agree with it is discrimination, in my opinion. I view this as being no different than having white and black drinking fountains, white and black bathrooms, white and colored restaurants, all of this stuff. This to me is sanctioned discrimination on that same type of level. You are basically saying that these people are being denied the same basic rights that everybody else is because of this or because of that. How is that different from denying somebody access to equal health care or equal education or equal pay for their work because of the color of their skin or of their gender? There is no difference. To me, it is all the same under the law. So when I sit there and see people talking about, well, we should have constitutional amendments banning it and this. So we're having constitutional amendment discussion to ban somebody from getting their basic fundamental human American civil rights. Does that make any sense whatsoever? We are sitting there and viewing this on religious principles, where if we did solely on religious principles and you banned it based off of it being a religious ceremony, then that would eliminate the separation of church and state, therefore making Christianity primarily the state religion, and also that in itself being unconstitutional, therefore banning it for those purposes being unconstitutional. And then from a civil standpoint, a white man and a white woman can go and get their marriage license. A black man and a black woman, or different mixed races, can go and get a marriage license in most states, in every state, excuse me, as long as they are a man and a woman. But in most states, you're denying two men or two women from doing that? How does that equate to anything other than discrimination? How does that equate to anything other than being unconstitutional? How does that equate to being anything other than state-sanctioned discrimination? To me, it doesn't. And I look at this from my own perspective. Being a white man in a relationship, living with a black woman that I will someday marry. It was back 50, 60 years ago that there were still laws in the books throughout this country where the marriage of different races was viewed as illegal, even between men and women. It didn't matter. If it wasn't black, black, or if it wasn't white, white, basically, it wasn't legal. A white man couldn't marry a black woman. A black man couldn't marry a white woman. In particular, that would cause a lot of furor and uproar. And that was something that was illegal. And that was something that a lot of religious individuals at the time said was against God's will. And they would sit there and support this, even though they were proclaiming themselves to be believers in God, who I thought taught to love everyone and forgive everyone for their sins and to not cast judgment lest ye be judged. I'm not a religious expert, but I would think those would be some of the pretenses that have been taught over the years. But again, in the 21st century, where all of these people, the same people that oppose gay marriage, want the freedom to practice their religion the way they want. They want the freedom to have their guns the way they want. They want the government and people to get out of their bedrooms and get out of their lives. But they have no problem when it comes to the queers and the stairs and the homosexters for butting into their business and butting into their lives. Now, look, I'm not saying that you have to like gay marriage. I'm not saying you have to be comfortable or okay or accept or view homosexuality as a moral behavior. That's not what I'm saying here. But I think it is high time in this country that we start getting out of people's personal affairs and we start minding our own goddamn business. And we stop being such a hateful, discriminating population. I truly believe that. If two men want to get married, who are we to judge? If two women want to get married, who are we to judge? You don't have to like it. You don't even really necessarily have to accept it. But at some point in time, I think you should have to deal with it. The Constitution is the Constitution and is not just there to be interpreted how you want and when you want. And Republicans and Democrats far too often fall into this trap of doing exactly that. The Constitution is set up as the law of the land. And in this case, to me, in all aspects, it prevents and flat out makes it unconstitutional to to prevent two women or two men from getting married. Like I said, if you view it from a religious context, then that basically makes Christianity a state religion, therefore would violate the separation of church and state, making that unconstitutional, meaning the ban done because of that being unconstitutional. From a civil standpoint, you have to go get a license. You can't deny gay people from going into a courthouse. You can't deny people from drinking from a fountain. You can't deny gay people from going to a restaurant or going to the same movies or this or that. So why is it okay for you to sit there and be able to go through the process, go to your county clerk or your courthouse and sit there and file for a marriage license, pay for the application fee, get your marriage license, and then get married how you want? Why can't these individuals here that want to practice their life their way, why can't they have the same freedoms that you do to be able to do that, pay their fee, get their license, and do the marriage the way that they want? I'm not saying that any church has to support it. I'm not saying that any church has to do the ceremony. No, they shouldn't have to, because again, it should be freedom of religion. If they choose not to advocate same-sex marriages, if they choose not to support same-sex marriages, if they choose not to do the ceremonies, I'm okay with that because it violates their beliefs. And I don't think that we should be in the business of telling churches what they can or cannot believe in, regardless of how we may feel about it. However, at the same point in time, that applies to the other spectrum too. Just because these people don't like it, don't agree with it, don't believe in it, view it as immoral, that doesn't mean that other people shouldn't be allowed to believe that it is, or other people shouldn't be allowed to do it. These people, if the courthouse wants to marry them, so be it. If they go and do their own ceremony with a justice of the peace and they want to do it, so be it. Again, in today's stupid America, to me anyways, marriage is not a religious ceremony, it is a civil ceremony. And to deny gay individuals that same basic civil right that men and women have when they try to marry each other, I view as completely and totally wrong and immoral in its own way and completely and totally unconstitutional. The fact of the matter remains is, if we're supposed to be the freest country in the world, which I sometimes doubt that we are, if we're supposed to be the greatest country in the world, how could we be so backwards on so many key critical issues in this time, in this day and age? I don't get it. Like I said, I view it, to me, it would be like this time in this age where if I went with Ashley and we went to go get our marriage license and they said, well, she's black, you're white, we can't allow this. And we sure as hell wouldn't stand for that, I wouldn't think, for the most part, in today's America. So why does stupid America tolerate discrimination against other people that just happen to have a different lifestyle and a different sexuality than they do? I don't get it. And it's one of the things that makes me really ashamed of America. And I hope that in my lifetime, I live long enough to be able to see everybody be able to get married equally.